I'm grateful for your time, man. Been reading your book too. It's so good. Far out.
Thank you.
Mate, it's like an entertaining read. So one of my all-time favorite books is McConaughey's book, right? So when I get your book, I'm going to, like the hardcover, I'm going to put it right next to it because literally it is close, if not the same as McConaughey's in terms of my liking. So well done. You've done a great job with it.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's that's high praise coming from you, knowing all these incredible people that you've interviewed. And also, you sit alone with a book for 2 years and you hope that it'll resonate, and you're reading the pages and you're like, I think this doesn't suck, but whether the world thinks that, we'll see. So it's you're literally one of the first people who has read it, who I don't pay. So it's really nice to get some honest feedback. Awesome.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome someone who many of you may know. If you don't know him, where have you been? You've been living under a rock somewhere. But my goodness, Josh Peck is his name. Now, if that name rings a bell for you, then you already know what he's been in. But for those of you that don't, he's been in Turner and Hooch. Many of you would have grown up with him in the show. I grew up with him, actually. Drake and Josh, those Saturday mornings, waking up, going over to my grandparents' place, drinking pub squash, which is an Australian drink, and just binging on it. So I got great memories there. But Josh, my friend, you've got so many incredible other pieces of work. You've got this great book coming out, which I cannot speak highly enough of. It's called Happy People Are Annoying. We're definitely going to talk about that title. It's coming out March 15th. But Josh, man, I could sing your praises for a while. But welcome so much to the Storybox podcast today, my friend.
Jay, what a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I was intimidated when I saw the list of guests that you've had in the past. And I was like, listen, I'm pretty incredible, but I don't know if I'm Matthew McConaughey. I don't know if I'm Tony Robbins. So I want to thank you, Jay, for slumming it with good old Josh Peck.
Nah, man, I feel honored to be able to unbox your story. Like, honestly, I feel a little bit under my britches, to be honest. So I'm including you in the McConaughey, Tony Robbins sphere of incredible people. Because, like I said in the intro, I grew up with watching you and Drake and Josh, and then more recently Turner and Hooch, which I thought was a great show, by the way. Then you're in Ice Age. I didn't mention that. But just being able to, I got the pleasure of reading some of your story, which is honestly insane, man. So I can't wait to dive further into that with you in just a moment. But before we do, man, my very first question for you is a question I love asking all my guests at the very start, which is, what does success look like for you?
Ooh, that's such a great question. Being a 35-year-old sort of quasi man, I say in my book, like I've achieved man status, or at the very least the height and weight of a full grown man. And so my idea of success has, I think, understandably changed. And I think, like many people, was obsessed with finish lines my whole life. If I hit this number on the scale, if I get this much success, if I work with these many impressive people, if I date enough interesting, cool, attractive people. Like, it was always this idea of, then I'll be happy. Once I accomplish X, then I will finally fill that hole in the soul. And it wasn't until I sort of pivoted and shifted and realized that I was putting the cart before the horse. I wanted the result, but I didn't know how to get there. And when I really allowed a good life to be the result of good living, and I started listening to that part of my brain that was there before I was worried about making a living or about what you thought of me. When I started allowing that voice to be a little bit more of the driver in my life is when suddenly I started getting all those things I always wanted. So now success for me is about like having enough time to be with my family while also doing something that I think is creatively, stimulating.
I love that answer, man. And you also talk about that happiness isn't enough. Like, we need to find contentment? Why is happiness not enough when so many people are striving to be, quote, happy?
I think, again, it's a really good question, is that happiness to me always seemed like a bumper sticker, like quiet your mind, or we live in Instagram culture now. So it's always like hustle, the 25-hour day. And it's all these sort of platitudes that we're fed nonstop. But the real question is, how do we get there? And for me, happiness always seemed like this thing that you were either born with or you weren't. Yeah. And I felt unique from as far back as I can remember, and not good unique, not, Beyonce unique. I was like, oh no, like it seemed as though I wasn't handed the same manual to get through life that my peers were handed, that things hurt me more. I was ultra sensitive, ultra analytical, constantly in my head. Yeah. And to top it all off, I felt very powerless. Like I didn't know how to direct myself towards the things that I really was passionate about. And so it occurred to me finally, once I started to get those things, that that happiness is sort of this transient idea that as quickly as the good things come, the bad things come, and they just are sort of in this messed up ballet for the rest of your life. Mm. But if I'm not reactive to it, and I can kind of allow these things to flow in and out of my life, I can find sort of this level of chill on a good day. But if like I'm at the line at the grocery store and you've got 13 items in the 12 item or less line, it might all go out the window, and I'm going to have a serious talk with you.
I love that, man. Like you also mentioned in the book, which I think was something that I resonated with a lot. You've got the very high highs and you've got the very low lows, like it's keeping up with the trend of that. And I think that's sort of what a lot of people are sort of chasing. They're chasing the high highs in life. They're kind of on that living roller coaster ride, but they're not expecting the lows, or they don't know how to deal with the lows when they do come. And one thing that I loved about your book was from the very beginning, you open up with this very vulnerable aspect of how you grew up. You weren't handed all the cards at all. So would you be comfortable enough with sharing with how you grew up, some of the lessons that your amazing mother taught you while growing up? Because it's a wild story, man.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because to your point, like I've certainly grown up for the better part of my life in the public eye. And yet, because I'm 35, so I'm on that weird line of millennial and Gen X, and then like Zoomers and Gen Z, I was still sort of trying to honor that old guard of Hollywood where you keep your personal side mysterious and you project this image. But what we've seen through social media and YouTube and reality is that like people hunger for honesty from the people that they watch on TV or in movies. They want a real moment. And I find that resonates with people, sometimes even more so than a great performance, is a truly honest connection. So that was sort of what inspired me to write this book, was this idea that like I had never told my story without joking about it. And while the book's funny and light in areas, I was like, I'm really going to have to sort of let people in on what I've walked through, and hopefully they can find some sort of identification through reading it. So to your point, I grew up with a mom who had me at 43. My mom's 77 now. She's a single mom. I never met my dad. We struggled a lot in New York, which isn't unique with a single parent, especially being a woman in the 80s and 90s. And she certainly had to be a lioness and figuring out how to provide for this kid. And we spent a lot of time, we were pretty, I would say, a majority of the time we were pretty middle class. And then there were certainly times where we were dead broke and wondering, where we were going to sleep that night. And I think that was what inspired me to sort of take my life into my own hands at a young age. I think people are always trip out that they're like, you were doing stand-up comedy at 10 or had your own TV show at 14. But for me, I knew that I had this talent and it was starting to work for me. I was seeing some success. And then I had this jet fuel behind me of like, I don't ever want to have this feeling again. I never want to feel, I never want to wonder where I'm going to sleep that night or worry that my mom and I are not going to be okay. And being an actor, luckily it's, as a kid, you could work at a coffee shop or, there's not a lot of jobs that afford you a big salary. But if you're an actor and it works, you can make enough money to, support you and your mom.
How did not having a father growing up contribute to your identity?
It's only been revealed to me through years and years and sort of peeling that onion and you think you're done. And then, you'll be sitting watching, some movie with like a very patriarchal great dad and you'll start crying and you're like, why am I weeping? Like, what? I think as a kid, I didn't resent not having a dad. I resented God for making me so different.
Yeah.
Because I was, by the time I was 16, I was 300 pounds and I had a single mom and we were sort of the black sheep of our family. My extended family was very educated and very kind of just took a traditional path. And we were the creative sort of, I don't know how you describe it. My mom's a headhunter, which is, if that term is a universal, in Australia, it's basically someone who finds someone jobs. Yeah. But, she lived paycheck to paycheck and she'd also like be, she'd go to department stores and sing with the piano player at, Macy's. And so she loved to perform and I loved to perform. So early on, I think like I just was so tired of being different. And then as I got older, I think that I had always told myself that I have this great mom and she loves me almost too much. And I know plenty of people who would say to me, oh, you never met your dad? I wish I never met my dad. So I figured I never missed something I didn't have. And yet in my 20s, when I found out that he had passed away, I got this overflowing sort of this wave of sadness. And I had to mourn this guy who I never knew. And I was so pissed because I was like, I can't believe I have to now feel sad for this guy that I never had a relationship with. So in many ways, I think it was these subtle ways in which it had woven itself into my experience, whether it meant that I would hold all men in my life to an unattainable standard because I would elevate them as these like quasi father figures, but they could never live up because they didn't agree to that weird agreement I had made in my mind, or and also doing the work on myself about what a man was to me and collecting apostles and examples of men that I could look up to and not feeling like I had to sort of live up to whatever the standard of men are that I grew up with watching in movies.
I was going to ask you now, at the age you are now, you are a father at the moment, which is awesome, man. You grew up without a father. So what do you believe after all the work that you've done, all the research, looking at different males or men in the world, I guess, what do you now believe makes a real man?
Well, I think that being able to squat at least 400 pounds and taking a lot of creatine, a lot, like scoops. No, I'm kidding. I've been blessed with an incredibly wonderful father-in-law who I think weirdly was sort of like the universe gifting me this sort of role model later on in my life. And I think we grew up, especially like when I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, with this idea that like the alpha male was just like this stereotypical guy who drinks and wants to fight and, is gross around girls and is just kind of like a douchebag. Yeah. But to me, what I believe like a true alpha is a guy who can quietly lead, who cares for the pack, who puts people before them. He'd hate that I'm even calling him out this much, but one thing I really appreciate about my father-in-law is like at every meal, if it's sort of buffet style, so everyone's sort of filling their plate, everyone is going to be eating before he does. I can't believe it. I sometimes want to be like, "Are you hungry?" Like I'm on seconds. No, I'm kidding. But like he puts people before himself. And in a weird way, and I love this adage that I learned in 12-step, this idea of like, help your fellow's boat to the other side and yours too will cross. Yeah. And I think that's what a real man does. You know, he puts people before himself and he's taken care of as a result.
I love all that. I agree with everything you just mentioned. It's also that humility aspect. I think, yeah, being of service, all those aspects. And also having, I guess, an inner strength more so than an outer strength. I think both are important because, people look up to you. They see you for who you really are, but then who are you really in those quiet moments? You know, like your character traits, your integrity, all those aspects I've found they form a real man. So if you can align them together and obviously, eating hundreds of a lot of food and all the creatine, all that sort of stuff.
Supplementation. When I was starting Turner and Hooch, which was a show I just did on Disney Plus, I was, number one on the call sheet. And it was this, I had been the lead of things before, but this was like a big budget Disney project. And I asked him for advice, my father-in-law, because he played professional football and he was a quarterback. And so he had been the leader before. And basically what he said to me was, make the mistakes your own and make your wins everyone's. So if someone messes up, take it on yourself. If you mess up, it's on you. And if you win, it's because of everyone else. And I think that's a good way to lead.
That is a really good way to lead. I've never heard that saying before. I love it. I'm going to frame it. I'm going to steal it and frame it. That's Please. A good one. That's a really good one, actually. Josh, I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned that you grew up and you were feeling different. Was that because of what you saw around you? Were people telling you that you were different, or is it more on the inside, like you actually knowing that you were different?
Yeah, I think it's both. And I think I certainly have a propensity for the volume to be very high in my own mind. And I'm sure no one can identify with that feeling, but I certainly blow things out of proportion between my ears. But in the same respect, there was enough evidence there to say, I was this overweight kid. I was into musical theater and obsessed with television. And at that age, it wasn't of the same value that it was even when I became a teenager. Like what was cool was Power Rangers and Michael Jordan, that was it. There weren't even that many like Jewish athletes that I could look up to. I'm like, yeah, there was like Sandy Koufax, but I think he played baseball in the 60s. And so all of sort of the social currency, we have money and we are the house that you want to come sleep over at because we've got the nice house and the nice stuff and toys and vacation. I didn't have that. And I didn't have, I wasn't great at sports. So I didn't have any of the things that sort of elevated you at that age. And so, yeah, I knew in a weird way that my superpower was performing, that it protected me, that I had sort of procured this ability as a necessity. They say that funny people are usually funny for very unfunny reasons. And that was it for me. But whenever I've in the past, whenever I've I'll meet an actor or something and they'll be like very good looking and very like sharp and in shape, and they'll try to go sort of like tit for tat with me with comedy. And I want to say, listen, you're probably not as funny as me, but with a face like that, I wouldn't be either. Like, I'd be like, I would trade in a second for what you have. But, so yeah, I think I just knew instinctively that like I needed to have this superpower, something I cultivated to give me some social currency.
Mm. And for those people that don't know, you grew up as a kind of like a child star, teen star. Quite quickly, you rose to stardom. So can you share the story of how that all happened? Because it's quite funny.
Absolutely, yeah. So it sort of came at this moment. I was 11 years old. My mom and I had sort of run out of money again, and I remember sort of the veil of adolescence falling and just making this vow to myself that I was going to figure out how to get us out of this. And my mom in that moment said, there's this performing arts high school. They're holding auditions. School will be back in session in a week or two. Why don't you try? And I get accepted into this performing arts high school with alumni like Alicia Keys and Claire Danes and Jesse Eisenberg. So suddenly I'm thrust. It's no longer like this hobby. I'm surrounded by operators and people who are like making cold hard cash from doing the thing that I love. And I start, auditioning all the time, whether it was at Nickelodeon or kind of anywhere that would have me. And I'm going to performing arts high school. And I wind up booking this Nickelodeon movie called Snow Day, which was with Chevy Chase and Chris Elliott and Gene Smart. And I was on set one day, and I'm 12 years old in Canada, never been out of the country. And the president of Nickelodeon winds up taking this liking to me, and I'm telling him jokes and he's cracking up. And my mom sort of sidles over to me and says, that's the president of Nickelodeon. You should tell him you want to be on this show, All That, which for anyone who doesn't know was like a SNL for kids. And it was the ultimate show for me growing up. I just wanted to be on it so bad, and they wanted nothing to do with good old Josh Peck. And I wound up mentioning it to him. I don't know why I had the balls to tell him that he should put me on that show, but I did. And 9 months later, he put me on the Amanda Show, which was like the sequel to All That. And it was with Amanda Bynes and Drake, who would later become my partner on Drake and Josh. And it was sort of like Amanda got the spinoff from All That, and then Drake and I got the spinoff from the Amanda Show. So between 12 and 15, I got my first movie, and by 15, I was living in Los Angeles with a TV show with my name in it.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like for you, man, growing up with that sort of stardom, that sort of spotlight thrust upon you? Did that contribute to the weight gain, or some other things that contributed to it?
I think, when we were making Drake and Josh, it was like this hit show, but on a kids network. So it was very specific, and there was no social media, right? So if you're on Stranger Things or even a big kid show today, if it premieres on a Friday, by that Monday, you've got, 10 million followers on Instagram just to start, right? And for us, we didn't get that sort of value right away, that once the show was over, we could then walk away and go, sort of the world was our oyster. So in some ways we were having this specific existence. And in other ways, I was doing this 9-to-5 job, and I would go home every night and like hang out with my best friend, Len, which I think is what sort of weirdly kept me slightly grounded and not too obsessed with all of it. But yeah, I think like I was certainly heavy, and TV and movies have great snack tables. So I'm sure that didn't help me at all. But the reality was I've been stuffing my feelings from as far back as I can remember. And food and whatnot was this great sort of solution. And then eventually, once I lost weight and got in shape, but I had the same brain, I had to kind of level up.
So why did you want to lose all the weight? And was it difficult for you to make that decision, or was it sort of an easier transition for you?
I mean, I grew up going to Weight Watchers meetings with my mom. Like I'd be sitting on my Game Boy and, wondering why we always had to go to 12-step meetings for Overeaters Anonymous, or like literally I was like, why are we always in church basements and like hospital, like rec rooms? It just, so I could see through my mom and through myself. I was like, oh, the Pecks don't do well with food. It's a menacing force to us. And I knew that if I wanted to get to where I wanted as an actor, that no matter what, like people would give me such high praise and the respect of, they'd say, oh, you're heavy, like you're going to be like Chris Farley or John Belushi, but they weren't comparing my talent because those guys were geniuses. They were just comparing my girth, that there was like one lane for big dudes. And I quickly realized that if I wanted to be a great actor, if I wanted to have the opportunity to play different parts, I couldn't stay at this size. And I talk about it in the book. When I was 16, I wound up doing this movie called Mean Creek, and I played this bully, and I was incredibly misunderstood. And the movie was so well received. And it was the first time that I'd ever played a real character and not sort of the typical big guy, best friend or bully. I was a bully, but he was very multi-layered. And once I did that, I realized that like, I can't wait around for 10 years for the next great part for someone who looks like me to come around. And I really wanted to kiss a girl. That helped too. But so all those things combined, I was 17 when I sort of began to lose weight, and it took me 2 years to lose about 120 pounds.
Wow. I mean, I can understand. I didn't go the fat sense, but I went the complete opposite. So I had this bad relationship with food as a whole. So I completely understand that. So what I would do is I would binge eat and then spit and chew, and then it contributed. Wow. I would exercise. I'd have all these problems that just a very, very bad relationship with food in general. It became a nasty addiction and obsession. So just exercise until I lost so much weight. I got to like 53 kilos, which is, I don't know how many pounds, but it's like I was a stick. I was 3% body fat. I ended up with major complications. So I understand the side effects of wanting, or just this bad relationship with food, and using food as your comfort in some way. And it's not a fun thing, man. So, but yeah, I went the complete opposite. So I just wanted to make that connection, but it is tough, man.
And isn't that so interesting? And I feel like everyone has some version of a story like the one you just said. Like, we approached our issues with food differently, but it didn't make it any more or less real, because you didn't have to deal with being completely overweight, but it still terrorized you to a certain extent.
Yeah. How's your relationship at the moment, or what do you do these days to keep those, I guess you call them demons, at bay?
I only eat things that are gray. No, I
love it.
I've been lucky, when I've been sober for the last 13 years. And so I was able to sort of put the plug in the drug in the plug in the drug. That'll be the sequel to my book.
I love that title.
I mean, drugs and alcohol. You can sort of just stop, and you never have to revisit that. And that's such a relief. But food can be such a tough sort of field to navigate. But for me, I've been able to keep it in check. All that being said, I never wake up in the mood for a salad, but it's become second nature to where I'm constantly sort of eyeballing things. I roughly know the calorie count of everything that I eat. And I work out 5 to 6 days a week, mostly for the mental part of it, because I love that sort of free endorphin rush. But also it's become, over the last 15 years, it's just become part of my DNA. And so I've found a good balance where I'm not terrorized by food and I'm able to indulge certain times, but overall sort of keep my weight in check.
Yeah, I'm the same way, man. Exercise is a big part of it. I get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, believe it or not. And
No way.
100%. Yeah. I got this philosophy in life, which I'd love to share with you. So it is, if I can beat the sun, then no matter what comes my way during the day, I can beat that too. Because if you think about it, the sun is always constant and things may not go the way we expect or plan during the day. But as long as I am setting myself up for positive things like exercise, meditation, prayer, all those aspects, first thing in the morning before something that is constant that has even risen yet, then I'm ahead. I'm ahead of life in my mind. And so whatever comes my way during that day, doesn't matter what it is, I feel like I'm ready, like I'm confident. I've done what I've needed to do early in the day. So, and then it's kind of like this transition period at the end of the day when the sun sets. It's kind of like, okay, if today wasn't so great, I didn't expect it to be the best or whatever's happened, and I don't feel great, then there's always going to be a tomorrow. And then do the same thing again and again. And it makes me feel great, man. That mental health aspect for me is important, and it keeps those demons for me at bay. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you. So hopefully that helps somehow.
Are there ever times when you're up at 4 a.m. where you just cry a little? Just a quick one.
Yes.
Like
I'll admit it. There are those days where I'm just like, I'm in absolute agony, but those are the days that I know that I'm like, okay, I need to do this. That's the day I need to push.
And do you hit a workout right away?
No. So 30 minutes is kind of like my time to wake myself up. So I open a book, pray, meditate, that sort of thing. And then around 4:30 in the morning, I'm out the door, pounding the pavement. And yeah, I usually get home around 7-ish in the morning. So yeah, it's nice, man. Like and because it's like first thing in the morning, right? Even though it's painful to some extent, I find it freeing because no one else is really awake during that time. It's peaceful. And yeah, I enjoy it, man. So that's just what works for me in a way.
And you're running for 2.5 hours?
Oh, no. I used to run for 2.5 hours, which was absolutely insane. But now I just run for like 47 minutes. And then I do probably a 40-minute CrossFit style high intensity workout. So that's sort of my drug of choice, if I can use that. Yeah.
I'm fascinated. On an empty stomach?
On an empty stomach. So I go fasted.
Wow. And then you have your first meal like at 7?
I actually have my first meal around 11:30 in the morning. So the way my brain works, I'll try and explain it for you. So my last meal would be around 6 o'clock the night before. I digest everything, get up, do my fasted cardio, workout, that sort of thing. But I feel so alive, like my brain thrives off not having anything in my stomach until later in the day. And I feel like that's what I need. So I get energy from, I guess, fat stores, but I'm usually, the mornings, man, is my thing. Morning time. If you get me late at night, I'm useless. I'm just terrible. Like, don't even bother contacting me at nighttime because you're probably going to get some weird like tangent. I don't make any sense at all, that sort of thing. But yeah, man, that's really how it works for me. But it might not work for other people. What do you normally do? Is it sort of fasted cardio, fasted weights, first meal, breakfast?
I mean, I don't want to brag, but I'm up at 3 a.m. So I don't feel that. No, I'm kidding. Oh my God.
You do the rocks workout.
I wake up at like 6:45 on a good day. That's when my son wakes up. Most of the time I wake up with him and try to let my wife get a couple extra minutes of sleep. I prepare his dinner the night before. or I'm sorry, I prepare his lunch the night before for school. But I make his breakfast. We'll chat a little, play. Usually he'll watch Sesame Street or something while he's eating. And I just love the whole routine of getting him ready. I try to be, I try not to check emails. I usually don't succeed at that. And all of that. And then out the door by, 7:45, and he's at school by 8:05. So and then it's most of the time it's a direct drive about 40 minutes to my boxing gym. And if I'm there at 9 a.m., it's like, I just know the reason I started actually going to this boxing gym when I did this action movie with Chris Hemsworth 15 years ago called Red Dawn, because he trained there and he was like, mate, you have to come here. And I did, and I fell in love with it. And what I love about it is that the only mirror there is for shadow boxing. Mm-hmm. No one cares. Everyone the amount of shit talking you can hear at a boxing gym is just, it's too good. And it's like, literally they should hold, for the presidential elections in America, they should hold the town hall meetings at a boxing gym. Because one guy will be like, Biden's the worst. And another guy will be like, best president we ever had. And another guy will be like, both of you are felons. Who cares? You can't vote anyway.
Oh, man.
So it's just like I get to work out, and it's all old school. There's very few machines. It's all like kettlebells, powerlifting, boxing workouts, heavy bag. And so, yeah, it's like, but I agree with you. And I heard Jeff Bezos say this as well. He's like, I try to save my high IQ meetings for early in the day because I know that's when I'm sharpest. And especially now at 35 and with a kid, like if I've had a big lunch, like I'm probably not going to be great at 4.
No. Yeah. It's I want a nap sort of thing.
Yeah.
And man, you've got a family. I mean, that's the difference between you and I is I don't have a family yet. I'm 25 at the moment. So I've still got quite a ways to go. But you mentioned something there with what your routine is with your son. And I'm curious, did you ever think that you would be a father one day? And what is it like knowing that you are a father?
I wonder if other guys who grow up without a dad have the same fear, but specifically with having a boy, I was so worried because I knew that I didn't have any reference and I didn't have any lessons to draw from a male influence. And I remember a buddy of mine said something to the effect of like, being a father is about being there for your child and reassuring them that they have to do these things where they might get hurt, but you will be there for them throughout the whole experience. And I'm pretty sure he said that as it pertains to learning how to ride a bike, but I used it as a gigantic metaphor.
Why not?
And I remember like when people would always ask, why don't you want to meet your dad? And when I was, in my 20s and I always said, well, I did the hard part in the sense of I had gotten sober from drugs and alcohol and my career was constantly up and down, but there was enough evidence to present that I would probably figure out something, that I wasn't going to ever be destitute, God willing. And I said, I know what he gets. Like he gets this like son that doesn't need anything from him. Like I got through the hard part and it was hard. And I said, but what do I get? And I knew he was older at this time. He was like in his 80s. And then of course, before I knew it, he had passed away. And there was a small time where I felt as though maybe I had missed that opportunity, but sort of the full circle of all of it was that like in being a good present father to my son, it allowed me to forgive my dad because I knew that it's not like he got out scot-free, that even by him not being there, like he had to miss out on all the things that I got to be present for with my son. He had to miss out with me. And yeah, I'm sure he got to sleep late more often than I do and enjoy the pleasures of not having a baby. But, I always say to friends who are having kids, because you get a lot of unsolicited advice, and you'll see, Jay, when eventually you're going to have a kid, a lot of people will try to scare you. I don't know. People have sick fascinations with scaring new parents. I don't know what it is. It's like Stockholm syndrome. And they're all like, so when you present that you're going to have when you have a baby on the way, parents like to go, sleep now, get ready for your life to change forever. And I hate that. And what I tell all new parents, and the only advice I give is, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. And of course, there are going to be moments of lack of sleep or inconvenience, but it is so overshadowed by like this surplus of cool moments and fulfillment on a level that you've never felt before. And unless you're really obsessed with brunch, kids will not get in the way of things. It will only enhance them. And it'll help you to weed out the things that you probably didn't want to do in the first place. So yeah.
Do you have any regrets?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so trite to say, right? Like if I hadn't made all my mistakes, I wouldn't be exactly where I am now, and I wouldn't trade that. But when I got sober when I was 21, and in between that period of having lost a bunch of weight and finishing Drake and Josh, I got this great opportunity to work with Judd Apatow and do this, huge movie. And I was not sober, and I was not in a place where I could really perform for anyone, especially myself. And I squandered that opportunity, and it was such an honor to be given that, especially by someone like Judd, who's one of the rare, sort of great people in this business. And that haunted me for a long time. My performance in Red Dawn haunted me for a long time. Because again, I was 23 years old doing my best impression of Chris Hemsworth, because I was like, that's a man. And that's who I have to be. Plus, he's so nice. He's like actually a good dude. And I'm like, this is it. I'm not enough, but he is. And I'm really good at impressions. Turns out, Jay, I am not good at impressions because I sucked. And all that, both of those things specifically, I lamented about, if only I had done well in that, what my career would look like, especially during moments where I couldn't book a job for the life of me. But inevitably now I would say, no, I'm so overpaid. My life is really good. I'm incredibly lucky. And so I know that it all led me to this moment.
I'm grateful to hear that, man. I really am. And in that movie with Judd Apatow, was that Drill Bit Taylor?
It was.
I love that movie. It's a good movie. Yeah. I think he did good, man. It was good.
It's a good movie. I'm fine in it. I think it was just about, I think I just was late a lot, and probably I could have positioned myself to possibly have there be more in my future. And
I feel like you could. Everyone has those moments where you kind of feel like you could have given more, like better. My grandfather used to always tell me, like if I was having a bad day, he's like, don't worry, there's going to be a tomorrow. But he always instilled in us this attitude of excellence. And whatever we did, didn't matter if it was a small thing, medium thing, or big thing, just like you give your best all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I had someone yesterday say to me, because we're making a joke, I made a mistake during an interview, and I kind of was like beating myself up a little bit for doing it.
Sure.
We were joking about it. But then he goes, you're too hard on yourself, Jay. And I thought about it this morning, and I'm like, well, why is that? I think it's because of that. I have that excellence mindset of, I don't want to stuff up. I know I could have done better. I should have done better. So why didn't I do better? But I think it's okay at the end of the day. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but yeah, I just thought I'd say that, like, it is okay, but we all have those moments in a matter of speaking.
Oh, I think you're an incredibly impressive person and obviously have that like high achieving. I mean, I know from some of your guests, like Ryan Holiday, who's a good buddy who helped me with this book, just as being kind of like I've been lucky enough to know Ryan since I was 19. And when I got the book deal, I called him and I said, I don't need a ghostwriter, but I don't know what to equate this to in writing a book other than a producer. Like, I need someone really smart that I can send pages to and I can get notes from them. And he was kind enough to sort of bless me with that throughout the book. And I know you're a fan of his and Robert Greene. And so I totally identify with this idea of like, I shouldn't have messed up. I should have been, whether it's more prepared or I should have been able to foresee that happening and adjusted before it happened. Like that's okay for the average, but I hold myself to a different standard. And I love that, there's a great quote by the famous playwright and director, David Mamet. And he says that the easily shamed will never learn.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just started, I had this great year of working pretty consistently with Turner and Hooch and this new show I'm on, How I Met Your Father. And, in showbiz, we have pilot season, which tends to be from February to March, where many of the major networks, Fox and ABC and whatnot, and where they make their shows for the upcoming sort of fall season. Yeah. So you find yourself auditioning a lot and there's a lot of opportunity. And I got back in acting class this month because what I didn't want to happen was where all of a sudden I had all this opportunity and I felt rusty or I felt kind of an imposter because I hadn't been acting for 2 or 3 months. And immediately throwing myself back sort of in the public square, being willing to fail in front of my peers and allowing a teacher to be like, I don't care whether you just had a great year. Like, I'm going to point out to you where you could be better. It's like, there's nothing better than that, but every part of my being wants to run and just stick with what I know I'm good at.
Yeah, I understand that, man. It's kind of like doing podcasts with those incredible people. You kind of feel like, am I worthy enough to be in their presence and talk to them? Like, being grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for your time and for you even saying yes. Like, that for me is like the best thing ever. When I got your email, I was like on a huge high. I'm like, no way, he wants to be on the show. Like, I was like so excited, man. And to be honest with you, when I heard that you're writing a book, I'm just like, this is going to be awesome. And, speaking about your book at the moment, I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, what was the most vulnerable moment for you in writing this book?
Wow. And I have to give Ryan credit for this, for being a great sort of apostle for me throughout this whole process of writing. But there were moments where I was talking, the chapters where I talk about when I finally decided to lose weight and what it was like doing that in the public eye. Because it's pretty amazing to see anyone lose 120 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean amazing just by the accomplishment alone, because it is an accomplishment. It's also just odd because it's such a drastic change. But then to have a lot of people marry themselves to the first time they fall in love with you. And for me on TV, that was as this like chubby kid with a high voice who was like super broad and shticky. So when I lost the weight in this public way between seasons 2 and 4 of Drake and Josh, in so many ways, I enjoyed all the response and how lovely people were and complimentary. But in the same respect, I did get this onslaught of people feeling like you were funnier when you were fat. Stop trying so hard, because I had sort of taken this guy away from them that they had loved, and they couldn't understand why I would do that. So in writing those chapters specifically, I had to really talk honestly about how unhappy I was being that overweight and why I inevitably wanted to change that. And I don't want to undermine sort of the beautiful efforts of body positivity and people who are totally comfortable in their skin if they're on the heavier side and whatnot. Like, that's amazing. My story is just specific to me, that for me, it was limiting, and it wasn't a choice. It was a byproduct of a lot going on inside that needed to be confronted. Mm. So I think those chapters where I talk about getting sober or being so overweight, again, my instinct was to make a joke and pivot, like, laugh and sort of don't lean in. And Ryan was sort of like, this could be the funniest book ever. If we don't care about you, if people can't, Ryan said to me when I was writing that chapter, he said, write it so that 16-year-old you would cry. Yeah. Because they would feel seen and know that only you know the nuance of what it feels like to be in that place. So that was certainly an extremely vulnerable place to be.
Yeah. I remember reading those parts of your book and getting emotional, because you go from being absolutely funny and then all of a sudden you get serious, and then it's like, oh, whoops, I just dropped, which is totally fine. And I love all that sort of stuff, which is why I think it's a powerful book, man, and why I think it's going to help a lot of people. And it's the fact that you were vulnerable, you were open, and you were honest. So I appreciate that. And I know so many others are going to as well when they do read it. But can you tell me the story behind the title, Happy People Are Annoying?
Again, I spent so much of my life making this snap judgment that happy people were just lottery winners. Like, they were privy to some secret that I was not privy to. Yeah. And I almost like became obsessed with my own discomfort and thought it was required to be artful or to accomplish things in that you just have to constantly be uncomfortable. And while bits and parts of that might be true, and forcing yourself to constantly leave your comfort zone, that's all good stuff. But inevitably, what I figured out was, like, I was obsessed with this destination when I really had to completely lose myself in the journey. Yeah. And even making a movie or a TV show is a great metaphor of that, like, for that, because I made Turner and Hooch for 8 months and had the greatest time of my life because I was doing the work that I love doing most. There's nothing I'd rather do more than be doing scenes on set for 12, 14. I wouldn't want to get a 12-hour massage, but being on set and doing these scenes for me is joyful. So I spent 8 months doing that, and it was wonderful. And then the show came out and it did great. And then it didn't get picked up for a second season. But my life, that was an instant, right? Like, the premiere was one day, and the day we found out the show was canceled was one day. But 8 months of my life was spent doing it. So I think that, to me, is what's most important, and why my joy can only be slightly affected by a win or a loss. And that took me a really long time.
Yeah. Where do you want people to get a copy of this new book, man, and learn more about you? You're not hard to find at all, but where do you want people to go more specifically?
Oh my gosh. Well, the book comes out March 15th. You can pre-order it now. There's links in my bios on Twitter at It's Josh Peck, on Instagram at Shua Peck. But Diesel Bookstore is this really cool, like, small business bookstore that we partnered with, and they've got signed copies where you can pre-order. And yeah, and I just did the audiobook for it. So if you like kind of like weirdly high-pitched, raspy voices with a lisp, you can go pre-order the book, the Audible book.
It's going to be a lot of fun to listen to the audiobook, I can imagine.
I went full bore. Like, I think the producer was looking at me sometimes through the glass, like, is he okay? I was like, I'm trying to have a moment here, okay?
I, for one, man, cannot wait to get a hardcover copy for myself, listen to the audiobook too. I'm a huge fan of it already. Like I said to the audience before, I was privileged to get a PDF version, and I'm loving it. Honestly, it's a great read. So if you trust my judgment, go and get a copy of the book if that means anything. But Josh, man, I got two quick final questions for you, if that's okay with you. I just noticed the time.
Sure.
So I want to be respectful of you. But what do you love the most about yourself and your story?
Oh, I'm really good at making fun of myself. The love part, now that's challenging. I love that I never gave up. And I love that I was able to, I talk about like when I pivoted to social media, I had a lot of social media success early on with the app Vine, and then eventually YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. And it became this great revenue source, and it became this great way to access my audience. But there were certainly some issues of optics and people who were critical of me, and going from traditional TV and film to social media, it felt like sort of this weird sort of consolation prize, or if you can't make it there, then you do this. And we know that line is blurred more so than ever. But at that time, it was sort of like this weird sort of status class. And I never self-judged myself. I decided that I'm an artist and I want to make content, and whether I'm shooting it on my phone or, on a $60 million show on Disney Plus doing Turner and Hooch, like it doesn't matter. Like, I'm here to perform. I hope if I do my job well, I can give an audience a reprieve for 10 minutes or 2 hours from their worries and challenges in their life. And so I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of, was that I didn't allow people's opinions to dissuade me from creating.
I love how you said you didn't give up. That's powerful, man. My final question for you, dude. This is my all-time favorite question. I ask all my guests at the very end. It's a hypothetical one. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
I would just want it to all be videos of my kids. That's it. I don't care. I watch videos of my son. I think thank God I've got one of the newer iPhones, not to brag, but because I think I've got like a terabyte on my phone of literally, and they're the most innocuous videos. I was watching my son the other day, today at the gym, watching a video of him for the first time in his life playing tennis, like earlier this year. So it would just be a highlight reel of I have one kid now, but by the time I'm 100, I plan to have like 20. It's going to be ridiculous. And they'll resent me because I won't be able to support all of them, but the videos will be cute.
How does Paige think about that? 20 kids.
She'll only be responsible for 2 or 3, and then, it'll be my other wives. I'm kidding, Paige. I'm joking. Please don't leave me.
I think that is a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. But Josh
Jay,
Peck,
what
man,
a pleasure.
Thank you so much, dude. You're epic. Honestly, thank you for joining me today on the Storybox podcast. Could have spoken to you for hours, man.
Dude, what a pleasure. I'm a fan of yours, and I feel like we're very much similar humans. So it's such an honor. You're great at this. Thank you for having me.